Hey all, this is Jack from Jack's Transmissions. So today I'm going to talk about an SST we have here. It has a speed sensor issue. It seems to be that now that this platform is aging, speed sensor failures are becoming more common. And I always tell people that if you were to tear the SST down completely to the last part, it would be that speed sensor. That would be the last part. So they're pretty difficult to change. It takes quite a bit. So what I'm going to try to do here is do a video on a unit that we have from a good customer of ours that wants a speed sensor change, and that's it. So I'm going to show how to take it apart, access the speed sensor, replace it, and then slap it all back together. I'm going to do the best I can to try to finish this using just normal tools. I'm not going to try to use anything fancy, no jigs, nothing like that. I'm just going to try to do it as if you're doing it at home to make it easy so people understand how to do this. So anyway, here's the SST in question. And let me cut away for a second here while I put my headband on. Okay, the trans we have here looks like it's been remanufactured at some point. All these bolts are different. On this one, it looks like they're either 12 or 13 millimeter. They take a 12 or 13 millimeter socket. Yours will probably take a 10 millimeter socket. It needs to be like either T40 or 45s back here. That should be the only difference. I think everything else on this is going to be OEM. So this would be a good example on how to change the speed sensor. The customer with this trans wants us to swap the speed sensor, and that's it. Just do the bare minimum. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to show how to swap a speed sensor in a SST. In the past, I've told people that if you were to tear this completely down to the last component, it would be the speed sensor. So it's not an easy swap. So here we go. Nope. Yeah. This is going to be a pretty long video. Basically, I'm going to do every step from start to finish on the speed sensor, and hopefully I won't run into problems on the way, but if I do, I always share that too. It's just life. Nothing ever goes perfectly. Now these guys, I'm a bit OCD on my tools and stuff. I like to keep them clean, so I'm constantly wiping my hands and my tools. No. Those are different sizes. That's nice. On the OEM bolts, they'll all use a 10 millimeter socket through here. They're all consistent. I always hate it when people put aftermarket bolts on stuff like this. It's totally unnecessary. And, you know, since I don't know what size they are off the top of my head, I gotta switch back and forth. All right, let's get this one. Well, those are 12s, I guess. Not 12s, but I use a 12 millimeter socket. Again, I'm trying to do this with ordinary tools to show that this could be done at your place without too much difficulty, hopefully. And, you know, another thing is, you know, I'm supporting you and showing you how to do all of this. You know, a lot of people don't like to share things like this. So, you know, if you like these videos, you learn something off of it, and you want to service your own trans or get your trans serviced properly, you know, give us a call. You know, give us the business on the part sale. I mean, we're supporting you. It'd be nice if we can get some of that support back. You know, everybody else out there in this industry just loves the, you know, catastrophize everything and just take your money and not help you out. But we've always been the type of company that likes to help not only the do-it-yourselfer, but the person that would want the whole trans rebuilt by us as well. We try to support everybody. So all right. Now these, that's a T30. So now we should be getting back to OEM bolts here, which is nice. So all of this stuff is what I'm familiar with. I'm trying to do this at a time when there's not too many people here, so there's not too much noise in the background. What you hear right now is our CNC running. We're actually making 2 4-forks for these SSTs. 2 4-forks go bad all the time in these things. There's a adhesive that holds the magnets in place, and they always break. So we've got another third bolt in here. So these smaller ones at the top of the valve body, these are T25. Very carefully pull the plug here. Now this is a speed sensor plug right here. This is the speed sensor wiring here, and this is where it plugs into the mechatronic. So what you want to do is just double check here first before you tear anything apart too much, just in case there's a connection issue here, something came undone. You know, make sure there's no bent pins or damaged wiring. On this one, everything looks good, so it probably does have a bad speed sensor. Very gently fish that out. So I like to pull these off too, get them out of the way. Now the gear selector, you want it all the way over to drive so you can access the bolt in there. Now the plug, there's a plug right here. I don't know if you can see it. I've got the phone strapped to my head, so this is kind of hard to do. This is a... Put it in. Not the best tool in my lineup. And then we take our Torx bit again. Where did I put that? There. And we go in here. And now we can pull this out. Put that aside. We're all done there. Now we need to work on the front. I like to lean it back a little bit like this. It makes things a little easier to access. We'll go through these. This is a 14. Again, we're hitting these unknown bolts again. See, you got 2 down here and then 3 down here. So if you're wondering what the noise is in the background, just take a break for a second. Come over here. There's our CNC making our billet shift forks that we make for the SST. This is what they look like. So basically what happens is these magnets here, there's a sensor on the mechatronic that can sense the magnetism, and it knows the shift fork position, you know, due to the location of the magnets. So if we look on this paper here, you can see how the magnets are positioned there. So what usually happens is, now that this platform is aging, this epoxy on the factory assembly will start to deteriorate, and this will move around, and then it'll give a false reading on where the shift fork position is, and then you'll get shift fork errors. So this has been a very consistent, nice upgrade that we have. They've been absolutely flawless for us. You know, if you ever need a shift fork upgrade, we've got them here as well, and they're not too bad to replace. All right, so go over here. So this is aftermarket too. We used to use these. These leak all the time, so I'm going to try to see if the customer would want to replace it. Like I said, they wanted just the minimum done, but you know, I'm surprised there's no oil around here. It looks like it's been holding up okay, but typically the ones that have the raw, like metal look like this are the ones that leak. The ones we use are the OEM. They look exactly like OEM cover. So now we'll remove this. Yeah, it feels kind of loose. It's just too easy to remove. That's because that's one of the reasons why they leak. So what I like to do is you could put pins in here and twist this off as a complete assembly, but I don't like to do that because I kind of like to take a look at things as I take it apart. So I'm just going to take the whole clutch apart as I disassemble here. It's going to take a little bit more time, but you know, it doesn't really matter. I know, there are people online, oh, you're going through with a hammer. I've been doing it this way for years. Never had a problem. So we'll put this back. I'm gonna compress this. I'm gonna try to address like some questions people usually have with these as I take it apart. Now, we sold a lot of these dampers. We rebuild ours. It looks like this one's been rebuilt. Yeah, so you can see here where they welded it back together. I don't know who does these, but we don't really like them too much. Ours is a bit more refined. See, this is what ours look like if you ever take one apart that has ours, or you want to buy one of our dampers. When we do them this way, they don't warp, and you know, there's not as much heat in it. So it stays in balance, and you don't have a high failure rate with the springs inside. You know, we keep the heat out of it. This is what ours looks like. We don't cut the whole thing completely apart like a torque converter and replace the springs and put them back together because it warps them. They're never the same. This way has been, we've been doing it this way for many, many years, and it's been excellent. So that's what ours looks like if you ever get in there. Also, these springs, you don't put them on this way. They go on this way. People call these clips for some reason. They're not. This is a spring. When it's in the basket here, in the clutch, you know, mated against the clutch assembly, this is supposed to help kind of push the assembly apart a little bit and keep like a preload on it. So you have to make sure that this is in there. If it's not in there, your clutch isn't going to work correctly. So anyway, you know, they're not complaining about this, so I mean, we'll leave it alone, but it's really not the best. It looks like it has an upgraded clutch in it. I have no idea whose it is. These are aftermarket seals. What we always tell people with the SST, the factory seals are the best seals. Anything aftermarket does not work. There's also a set of O-rings on the return spring side of these clutches too that are black that people replace. They deteriorate quickly over time, and they don't hold a good seal. They always go bad. We have the correct seals here for the, you know, the chemicals that you find in the ATF and the press, you know, the temperature changes, all that stuff. We actually have the correct O-rings here for these. Yeah, these pistons do not do well, so this is probably going to be another thing we're going to see if they want to replace. You know, they probably won't, but you know, it's another thing worth noting. So when pulling this nut off, you don't want to hit it with something sharp like a screwdriver, because what'll happen is you'll mushroom the back side of it and it'll rub up against this housing here and you'll get metal shavings in your trans. So something that's flat, that's just gonna, you know, put the pressure on the outside here and not mushroom it is all you need to do. Oh, of course, can't be easy. There we go. So this gear, you want to take a close look at every tooth. Just do a good visual mechanical inspection. You want to check to see if any teeth look like they have any damage to them, because if there's any metal in the trans, this clutch assembly tends to pull whatever it is in the trans up and loops it around and it'll get into this gear. This gear looks okay, but this is the oil pump drive gear here. That looks okay. I think these are 13s here. All right. Move everything out of the way. That's about it. Get the shift shaft off, remove the 3 bolts in here, and then obviously all the case bolts on this side and on the other side, and it's ready to split open. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do with this one is this seal on the outside here is what we call the environmental seal, and then you have the case seal behind it. I'm going to try to pull the environmental seal out because like I said, this customer really doesn't want to replace more than they have to. Let's see if I can. Yeah, I'm just going to let it rip out. I always have them just rip themselves out when I pull it apart because it's a good idea to replace those seals anyway. All right. Give it a quick bump. Pull the case off. Now, what I like to do is, since this stuff just constantly drips the entire time you're taking it apart, I like to try to put things on these rags here so it doesn't get too much oil everywhere. What I like to do is just hold these two together like this and just lift. Wiggle and lift. It comes right out. A quick look at this. This is a fork from a competitor, obviously. Seems like it's okay. So again, the customer just wanted to leave everything else alone, so we'll leave it. That actually doesn't look bad. These two. You always want to check these brass pads here because they always wear out quite a bit. Yeah, this one has some pretty good wear. And I don't know if you noticed that, but a piece of brass just flicked off there, so I'll probably have to go through those. Now we have 7 bolts here. They're all 13s to pull off that gear cluster assembly. I'm just tossing all this stuff in a bin here because I'm going to run it through the washer to try to keep things as clean as possible for assembly. And let's see, what do I do with my other one? Okay, the trick to this is it's kind of a tight spot right in here where it's not a press fit, it slips in, but you have to pull it up evenly in order for everything to come out. So what I'll do is I'll gently put a pry bar under here, and then I'll go over to this end here and put it under a convenient spot under here and just slowly wiggle it up. Oh, you know, it's one of those things where you have a camera strapped to your head, you're gonna look like an idiot. All right, so we got that. Do it again. Moving up. After you get it up a little bit, there's a small gear under here you can put the pry bar under, and then there's like a stepped area here you can go under. Just very slowly wiggle it. Just take your time, and then it'll pop. Wiggle that out. And that's it right there. That's the speed sensor. So when you pull this plate off, you're gonna have some O-rings. What I like to do is just pull them out. Some might stick here. Here's one. Here's the other. All right, so we have those. Now I just use the same Torx bit we've been using on everything else. Now this piece here, you want to be careful. You know, squeeze it pretty tight and then pull up, and it'll come out. If you don't squeeze it tight enough, you'll actually damage the wire here. I mean, not like it matters. You're replacing the speed sensor anyway, but so that's all there is to it to get to it. Here's our new one. Let's go test this and see if it actually is bad. If we may have another issue here. We're working on building a large test station bench here because we have random testers all over the shop like this. We're trying to clean things up a bit. So maybe in the next video you'll see all that stuff. We have everything from the solenoid testing machine to pressure sensor testers. It's pretty cool. All right, well we're at 0. It sees nothing. Typically what will happen is, if I wiggle this around, it'll come back. But this one is just totally dead. So yeah, so it was a good diagnosis by that shop. They were right about that. So this sensor is definitely bad. All right, so before I put the sensor back in, what I like to do is try to get myself set up correctly here. So this is the environmental seal I try to take off before. They could be kind of a pain. So I'll move this out of the way. So what I'm going to do is let this drain a little bit. I'm going to pull this filter off because I want to replace the filter anyway. You should always replace all the filters anytime you go through this. And I'm going to pull these pistons out in here too. I'm going to run this side of the case through the wash just to get it so things will assemble cleaner. Okay, see how this one's kind of grayish? This is an aftermarket seal. They're very problematic. They blow out pretty easily. So I'm going to put an OEM piston back in here. These aftermarket ones don't fare too well. You can see the OEMs versus the aftermarket, and all of these appear to be aftermarket. Yeah. I mean, anytime we tune these transmissions, we always tune them at high pressure. So these aftermarket seals might do okay in like a factory application that you don't really touch the car. But many of the people we deal with like to upgrade, up the power on them. So Yeah, this is definitely not good, so we're not going to use these. Okay, so we're going to replace those. I better check these too. I bet you these are probably aftermarket too. Yeah, it's one of those things where you think you're doing a good thing by replacing it, but there's nothing better than the OEM. So I'm going to put OEMs back in place of those. Okay, yeah, and to pull this filter, this is what we call the sump filter. Sump filter is easy to swap. Use a magnet, if I can find one. No magnet. Pry bar. There, just pop it out just like that. And of course, it's just going to constantly leak. So we'll set that aside. Just very gently here without touching the housing. You don't want to scratch the sealing surface on the housing. Just pull this guy off. The new filter comes with a new seal. Get that off. We'll let this continue to drain. That's just a trash magnet. Just set that aside. Yeah, these things suck. I hate stainless filters. They do not filter anywhere near as well as a factory paper. So I'm going to be tossing this and putting a paper filter in there just so this thing lives. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and clean these cases real good. I'm going to go ahead and change out this seal as well, because since the center diff's been moving around in here, chances are that this seal is probably compromised. So I'm going to go ahead and pop the seal out. I'll show you how to replace that. So I'll take a short break here, get everything cleaned up, and then we'll show the process on assembly. All right, so give an estimate to a customer on this unit. They approved everything, which is really nice. It came in for speed sensor, but I gave them a list of all the concerns we had with it, and they decided to do the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and strap the phone back to my head, and we'll show what assembly looks like. Okay, so I got everything cleaned up, ran everything, inspected all this stuff, ran everything through the wash, got it all ready to go for install. So we're going to show you how to do that. First, I'm going to remove this seal. I meant to do it on the disassembly, but I forgot. So this seal is really tricky. If you notice, there's a step here where the seal sits in the housing. A common mistake people make is they'll install this seal, but they'll run it flush with the housing. And the inner part of the seal is actually up. It's supposed to go in right here. See this line? That's where it's supposed to seal. I don't know if you can see on the camera. All right there. So it's supposed to seal there. So if you have it flush, it'll get really close to these splines here, and you'll have a leak. You don't have to be down here in this area. So that's the secret behind preventing that seal from leaking. So we're going to go ahead and just take it out. I like pushing these from the inside out. It's just a lot easier. And with seals like this, they have a sleeve like this. What you want to do is, where's my hand? Yeah, I think we're okay. What you want to do is you always want to push these seals out, not push them in further. Because of the sleeve and everything, you don't want to, damage the surface any more than you have to. So anyway, that's another piece that we're tossing. So we'll worry about putting that in later. I like to put that in last, because if you put it in first, there's a pretty good chance you're going to damage it when you put the unit together. So we don't want to do that. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is lubricate some areas here. The bores for the pistons. Right here, these are guides for the forks. I want to make sure they got a little bit of lube in them. This guy here is a pain, so you want to make sure there's plenty of lube in here. Let's see, what else we have? This one. Now these right here can be a problem when installing the cluster, so I really like to hit these pretty good with oil. All the way around. Just help everything go in a lot easier. All right, a few other pieces. We have our O-rings. So OEM magnet. This is a alignment dowel pin for the odd gear cluster. Put that in there. These right here are the passages to the pistons for the even gears. This right here, these are just environmental seals to prevent oil from leaking past the bolts that hold the odd assembly from the outside. They take a 13mm socket. Okay, now another trick I do to make assembly a lot easier is these alignment dowel pins for the case. I smooth them out a little bit, clean all the rust off of them, and they're thicker on the bottom and narrower on the top. The thick end goes into the case, the bell housing side of the case. I'll put them in there. And if I do it right, the housing and everything will just slip right into place without too much effort. These corrode pretty badly, and there's like a galvanic reaction between these and the aluminum case because you have steel and aluminum together. And that creates an issue where they're pretty tight in there, so we want to be careful with that. I'm going to go ahead and put our sump filter in. So anytime you're in these things, you want to change out that sump filter because it's impossible to access with the trans in the car and the trans actually assembled. So what I like to do is add a couple of nice magnets on the inside to give us a little bit more of a chance of catching any debris that runs through the trans. Our new speed sensor. Come on. Carefully guide it through. We don't want, when we sandwich the case together, we don't want it to damage the wiring here. So there we go. The bolt for it. Now the pistons, these are OEMs. This is what the OEM looks like. You see the markings in here? If you have an OEM piston, that's what it looks like. The aftermarkets, the customer decided to get rid of the aftermarket units and go with the OEMs per our recommendation. The aftermarkets are smooth here inside, so these tend to rip. I actually found one here that failed. So you can see the pressure gets underneath here, this This looks like it's just regular rubber. It just fails. And then, you know, the pressure comes through and blows it out. So this was really nice here. It came out of a car that we had issues with when we were using those, and we just could not figure it out. It would not go into reverse on a cold day. And we took it apart and found that was it. And we're like, okay, not using those anymore. So OEM it is. We've never had OEMs rip like that. They've been pretty good. I try to put these pistons here in fairly dry. I mean, the board does have a little bit of oil in it that I put in there. You want to be stiff because if they're stiff, it'll make it a lot easier to put the case on later. You'll see what I mean when I try to align the forks. So center diff, you always want to make sure these splines are in good shape, which it is on this one, and clean it up really well so you have a nice surface to work with here, you know, for the new seal. Now what I typically do is, again, I'm trying to show you how to do this so it's easy, you know, at your location. So you see the edge of my bench right here? You want to set it up like that, and you want this piece to be on the higher part of the bench, leaning over just like that. Now this cluster here, I went through it, synchros look good. There's some modifications I make to it, but I'm not going to give away everything that I do. But this assembly is all ready to go. Now this piece here, you have to make sure, and this goes right here between this assembly here. So what I typically do is I put it on and then I just force it over to its side a little bit so it sticks into that location. And that's about it for that. Make sure you get the reverse idler assembly here. So all right, let's see if we get lucky here. Let's see, make sure we're not forgetting anything. Things are a little different when you have a camera on your head and you know you're recording versus doing it the same thing every day. So what I'm gonna do is just slip it in here. When we got the forks fairly well lined up here, what we're gonna do is lift this up, and I'm gonna move it off the edge of the bench here so it comes off the side. So gently center diff over, just like that. And now we'll just lift this up a little bit and keep it even, and it should slide in mostly. It will get to a point where it will stop. If it does that, just double check, make sure everything's straight. Well, that's good. Move this back and forth. Of course, nothing's going to cooperate while the camera's on. There you go. So that's it for that. Now we have 7 bolts for the top there. That's these that take the 13mm socket. So the shortest ones go here and over here. You have one with a flange on it, that one goes here. And then the rest of them that are the longer length go in these areas. All right. All right, those are in, all that moves around. That's good, so we're perfect. That's all perfect. Okay, so what's next is these pistons here. Again, we'll get some lube here, put them in. Again, you don't want to put too much. I'm leaving these dry and lubricating the bore a little bit so they don't slide too easily. It makes assembly a lot easier. Put this guy in here. All right. Next thing I like to do, so this bearing here is directional. You see this piece here? So the part that's in to the center line more points down, and this piece over here that points out, you know, is out the furthest, comes out. It makes sense when you look at this piece here, because when it's on, We sell a lot of these bearings because a lot of people screw this up. So if you look at it, come in like this, it's hitting the plastic, you know, the cage of the bearing, and you're gonna crush that when you put this together. You have to have it the other way, where the plastic is not making contact with the gear, and that's the correct spot. So let's put it in. All right, so now I'm gonna take this. This is 6th gear, by the way. And where's the fork? I cleaned up and reconditioned the forks. So, this piece fell out. I thought I heard something. All right, put this on like this. And now the 2 fork cluster. Magnet facing this way, obviously. Put this in, just like that. I gotta be careful with the bearings underneath. All right, so this is all in, so that seems happy. So now what we wanna do is use a pair of needle nose pliers like this, and we want to move the pistons up so these guides are in more of a central location. Move that up a little bit more. And this one, see how it's pointing down? So when you're trying to put the case in and the guide on the top case tries to come on, you know, slip over this, it's not going to be able to because it's just too far over to the side. So you want to move the piston up and have them almost all the way up, but not completely. See, like this one's too far. You want to go down. Then that's why you want these to be a little stiff when you put them in, because it helps hold all this stuff up when you put the upper case half on the assembly. So and that's another reason why things should be nice and clean when you do all of this, because it actually helps not only find hidden issues with the unit, but also helps with assembly. All right, so this is all ready to go. Now we're going to go ahead and take the upper half here. It's also nice and clean. And go through and lubricate everything here, make install as easy as possible. All right, we have our pistons, the remainder of our pistons here. Slide these in. Last one. The big pistons are first and reverse, since that requires more leverage to get it into gear. You know, obviously it needs a bigger piston, so it all makes sense. All right, so now we'll going around all bolt holes in this case is not necessary. All it does is just make a mess. So as long as you're inside all of them, it'll do just fine. Now it did have anaerobic gasket maker on this from the factory. You can use that if you want, but I found this normal sealant seems to work just fine. All right, so I have all this ready to go. Now, one important thing about this is, especially if you clean up these alignment pins, is you don't want to force anything. Just be real gentle with it. I saw an awful lot of these because people try to force it together and they end up breaking these all the time. This is the 1R assembly. Just don't force it. You know, just it'll slide right down where it needs to be with ease if it's done right. So here we go. Actually, you know what? I forget sometimes because it's got a new sensor in it. I'm going to put a little bit in here. Help protect the wiring a little bit. I just don't want the wiring to be chafing on the metal in there. It can go through the sheath and then cause a problem in the future. We want this to last, so. Coming down, nice and gentle. All right. Give it some taps. Take a look in here. Oh, see, there's that one that can be problematic. So that's good. Just want to go through and make sure all these shift forks are happy. Don't want to force anything. Yep, we're all good. So, oh, there he goes. It just slipped right into place. Now, another thing you want to be careful with is these plates. Retaining plates for the upper bearings on the clusters. You want to make sure that they're in alignment. So what I like to do is just put one on each plate just to keep it in alignment, because if it's off alignment and you torque down the case, it's going to damage part of the case in here. You don't want to do that. You want to keep them in alignment. So, and also the aftermarket bolts that were in this, I'm just not comfortable with these. So I went ahead and found some OEMs off of a core unit, and I'm going to put the OEM bolts on this. I'm just, you know, OEM did a really good job on this stuff, and I just don't want to, you know, aggravate a good thing and not do anything I'm not familiar with here. You know, this customer is complaining that they've been fighting with this trans after it was rebuilt in the past, and you know, I want to make sure that it lives for them and they don't have to worry about anything extra here. So, all right, where's the 10? Okay, so now everything's going to use a 10, which I really like. So just very gently go down with a few of these. Looks like everything is coming together, you know, just fine. So now I'm going to hit them a bit. All right, there we go. Now we can remove these. Now the reason I didn't like the aftermarket bolts that were in there is these have a groove in them, and the groove bites into the case to seal it so it doesn't leak. The aftermarket bolts that were in here didn't have that. They're just flat. So, you know, it's probably not a big deal, but again, I don't want to take any chances with something I'm not familiar with, so I'm going to go ahead and just use the OEMs. I'm going to put a very small amount of sealant around each bolt hole here to help with sealing, because once they bite into the case once, which they did, you know, from the factory, when you reuse them, it may not, you know, it may not bite into a new area. It's going to probably bite into where it was before, and there could be a possible leak. So we just want to make sure we don't have any leaks here, and that it won't hurt anything to put sealant here. We just want to make sure that well, this stays happy. So what I'll do is I'll smear it a little bit with my finger, make sure it's nice and even. Those. All right, so now I'm gonna put these bolts in. Now, a trick to these is when you're torquing these down, you don't want to hit one super tight and then hit the next one. You want to go very slowly because the plate, when you torque the bolts down, is going to pull the bearing into the case. So you don't want to, have one bolt tighten down and have everything cocked over in there in the case and cause some damage. So you want to be very careful on how you torque these down and just be gentle with it. So these bolts use the T45. So what I like to do is just go a little bit till it stops, a little bit till it stops, go over here. See how it's pulling it up a little bit. We don't want to force it too much. So we'll go over here, back. All right, across. All right, so that looks good. So now you can hit all of them. All right, so now we have, takes a 14mm socket, these detent balls. This is for the odd cluster over here on this side. I don't take the detent balls off out of here or up in here because I found, my way of putting it together prevents you from having to do all that. So I don't have to disrupt those, leave them like they are. All right, so that's good. Now we're gonna take our filter, put a new line filter in here, which you should do anytime you pull this off. And of course, it's a nice paper filter, so it's gonna catch a lot more. See the difference between the stainless and the paper. It's very similar design, and I really like the paper stuff whenever I can do it. On all the units I service, from the GTRs to these, I try to stick with paper anytime I can. All right, so there we go. That's it for this part of it. I'll flip it up. Roll it back here. And now we're going to put the remainder of the case bolts in. Now we have these 13s. with the 13 socket now. And over here, when I cleaned and blew all this out, it disrupted these seals in here, so we want to make sure they're back in the grooves. 1, 2, 3. 4. All right. Those are good. They move nice and freely. It doesn't look like there's anything damaged. Oil pump gear. It's the oil pump drop or drive gear. Clip. Make sure it snaps in just like that. All right, so now I'll give it a little bit of loop through here. And I like to come around here too so the front cover goes on easy. Lubricate this whole area. All right, now the clutch assembly, they approved putting the OEM seals that we recommend in there, and I changed out the O-rings as well. So you can see the difference here in the seals. So if you have these darker seals, they're junk, they're no good. The OEMs are more of a grayish color. So we swapped that, and we also swapped the O-rings. Take a look at the O-rings here. So this is what was in there. These black O-rings are terrible. If you ever see these, get rid of them. They're gonna come and haunt you in the future. This one here, it was in a clutch that was only like a few weeks old, and if we take a look, it's no longer round. They tend to get hard and kind of come out of shape. So we got 0.6 millimeter there difference from one end to the other. So these are identical to OEM in how they're made, where they keep their shape and they always stay round, so you're not going to have any piston seal leaks in your clutch. So we swapped those out too. Yeah, here's his old ones here. But yeah, so I hate that stuff. So anyway, pulled all that stuff out. Clutch seals really nicely on our test station, and we had to change the clearances in the clutch to where we like to have them, and now everything is good to go. So slide the clutch in, just be very gentle, put it in. Now a little trick is sometimes these C-clips, if you're playing with the clutch, a lot of people don't install them correctly. If you don't install them correctly, the clutch is going to move around. It's not going to be even. So you can see how this turns. We have no wobble to it, so these clips are seated properly. So that's just one way to check your work if you're working on this stuff. So thrust nut here. Again, you don't want to hit it or tighten it with anything that's sharp, something flat. Again, no special tools. I'm just trying to do this in a way so you can purchase parts from us, support us, and do it yourself. Again, we're supporting you. We really hope that you would do the same and support us as well. So I'll take some lube here. I like to put everything together dry and then lube it afterwards. It's probably my OCD talking there. Okay, so we got that, and now we're going to take this nice damper that we rebuilt here and replace it. Again, this one, I don't know, it just has pigeon turd welds on it. I really don't like those, so they went with ours, which is nice. So I'm going to put this in. Just going to make sure. Now that spring that I showed you that goes in the back, remember I said it's more like a preload spring, it's not a clip. That's what it does. See how it springs back? That's what this spring does back here. So if you don't install the spring, none of this stuff's gonna work right. It's supposed to have preload to it like this, thrust preload. So something to keep in mind there. I'm gonna show you how I put this together. Just push it in, come around there. So I made a special tool. It's very simple. It has a step here on this, so it'll put even pressure on both this piece and the clip when I seat it. So hopefully it goes together nice and even here. There we go. So that worked out pretty good. It turns nicely. It's all good to go. Now we're going to take our new cover. And remember before, I was talking about how you could tell the difference between a good one and bad. See how this one's like an OEM coating on it, or this one's silver? These leak all the time. These are, you know, an updated revision that don't leak. So we're replacing this as well. I'm going to come through here, and you got to lubricate everything extremely well with these covers to assure that it seats properly. So the way I do it, just add oil with your finger. All these parts I'm showing you, we sell. We keep them in stock. You know, the filters, this cover, the seals. We have our billet shift forks. You know, the speed sensors, all of this stuff. We're more than happy to sell the components to you if you want to try to do this yourself, or you know, if you want me to do it. Obviously more than happy to. And you know, there are some things that I'm not going to tell you everything. There are some additional things that I do to really make these things work extremely well. So if you want to ship your whole unit to me and have me work on it, that's great. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this is this seal is it's pretty flexible, and you have a lip here. So what you want to do is very gently just turn, moving in. If you look straight on in here, you could see if you fold it in or not, if it's in straight. And it went in nice and straight, we're good. So we want to be very gentle here. Just give it some taps. And that's it. So now we're going to go ahead and take bolts for the front cover, install them. There are people that take a bunch of Loctite on these. I don't do that. It's not necessary. This assembly here, it doesn't turn, it doesn't do anything other than act as a cover to prevent oil from obviously spilling out of the unit. All right, now the infamous output seal. So this is how I do it. Put some lube on my finger. Actually, we'll give it a little bit more here. So put plenty of lube in here. Only on the shaft. Don't put any on the housing. You want to keep the housing dry. And Mitsubishi's absolutely love to leak around the outside of the seal. So what I've been doing since the old DSM days is I put just a little bit of sealant around the outside of the seal to give it a little bit of help if the housing is scored or it's not absolutely perfect. We're not dealing with a leak that's going to seep and cause issues in the future. We want this to seal for a long time. So put it in here. And there's another special tool that I made. It's kind of old, but it's stepped right here. I just put a bunch of weld on the outside here. So this, when I push this in, the tool will stop when it's at the right step height. So, I mean, you could do this by hand too. For years I did it by hand before I decided to actually make something. But, you know, like I said, you want just a little bit of a step in there. Even though it does bottom out on the tool, it doesn't let me go too far. I still like to be really careful and make sure I have this right, because if it's not right and it leaks, you gotta pull the T-case out and everything to get to it, and it's really hard to replace in the car. It's a huge pain, so just don't want anybody to go through that. So with this still lubed here, we'll put the environmental seal in. The cone side goes towards the seal here. This does nothing but prevent the environment, you know, any dirt or material from getting into the main seal and damaging it. So I don't know if you can see, you see how that works. You can see why that seal needs to be in quite a bit there. There we go. That's how it's supposed to be. So now to make it look nice, because one time I left some sealant on it, and customer got their trans back, and boy, these people get so mad over little things. He's just yelling at me over the sealant on the seal. I'm like, okay, just take it easy. It's not hurting anything. There we go. There we go. There we go. Looks nice and clean. So now these splines wear out between here and the T-case just due to friction. So you don't want to put this together dry. And it's the same with this part here. We've seen the crank flywheel here, the splines strip out on these as well. So what I like to use is this spline grease. Ford had a lot of problems with splines over the years, and just put them over these areas. Just put plenty of grease on those splines. Anytime you get a trans from me, you'll see this blue stuff on there, and that's what this is. Put some on here, make sure it's in all of the splines, packed in nicely, and it'll save you from having to buy a new center diff or T-case in the future. This stuff works extremely well. So, go ahead and put the cap on this. All right, so that's it for the front. Now we're going to turn and go to the side here, valve body side. We want to put this selector shaft in. Shaft needs to point towards the center line of the case here. We'll go over to, this was essentially the neutral drive position. So, this torques in here. Now we'll install the plug. All right, so these were kind of chewed up, these gaskets for the valve body. So I'm going to put new ones in there. I just want to make sure there are no leaks, and this guy has a good unit here. Here we go. Well, all right. Okay. So now with the valve body, obviously you have these alignment pins here. You make sure it slips into place as it should. Oh. All right, now you gotta be careful with this. Make sure this is in alignment. It goes in, there you go. Just like that, because if you torque this down and this isn't in all the way, you could damage the flex cable behind this connector, so you want to be really careful with that. All right. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get the body bolts in. All right. Now, if you remember on disassembly, there were 3 of these for the connector. I only put 2 back in to make life easier. If for whatever reason the valve body needs to be pulled, the bolt that's back here when you're in the car is a real pain to get to. And it's totally unnecessary to have that in there. So I just put these 2 in on the outside. So everything's right there, and it's easy to remove in the future. Plug this in. That's our new speed sensor. So it's a little bit more cable than the OEM, but it'll get the job done. So the valve body, it seemed like it was in pretty good shape, so we left it alone. Obviously, if you look over there, we know what we're doing with valve bodies. We get a lot of them. So, you know, if you need any valve body work, please let us know. We'd love to help you with that. We have some pretty interesting testing equipment for the valve bodies that I may decide to share someday. I'm not sure. We'll have to see. In this industry, people love to copy, so I'm trying to hang on to what we have for as long as possible. Go. I am going to reuse their oil pan bolts. These look pretty good, so I don't see any reason to replace these. All right, I think that's it. So that's all there is to it. You know, there's obviously a lot of stuff I did behind the scenes. synchros, the gear sets, the valve body, all that stuff. You know, if you need valve body work, I think we know more than pretty much anybody out there on these. We do an awful lot of these units. So I guess if you have any questions, give me a call. You know, I'd love to help you out, but hopefully this was helpful to you. And let me get this camera off my head. Anyway, I hope this will help you out. We're going to go ahead and reprogram the valve body in our test vehicle, and then we're going to you know, run it through a series of tests, including the teach-in process to make sure everything's happy with it. And then we test drive it while my brother logs. You know, he views pressures, things like that, to make sure everything's happy. And then it's good to go back to the customer. So we're not done yet. We got quite a bit of work to do. I'm probably going to share that as well in a different video, but hopefully this helps you out if you need any parts. Thanks.